get set. All right, welcome everybody. Great to have you again for one of our recovery seminars on recovery community centers. Today we're going to be a little bit more conversational than presentational, and please do chime in as we are going through it. To start us off, Catherine, if you can share the slides with everybody. I just wanted to remind everybody that our goal is to advance the science on recovery community centers. And because of that, we always seek to bring together all the stakeholder groups. And that's why we really love that you all come ready to talk and chime in and share thoughts. This is the team that discusses everything and comes up with new ideas and directions for us. And of course, you guys give us feedback that we then discuss and hopefully translate into what you hope you'll get to see here. So always keep the communication open. If there's something you wish we did and aren't doing yet, let us know and we'll work on that. Next slide. If we can do our poll right now to see who's in the room. This is again talking about our multi-stakeholder groups so we know who we have and who we need to reach out to. So let's take a moment to just complete this Zoom poll.
And also, if anyone needs closed captions, we do have a live caption with us today, and you can select from your Zoom bar to turn them on.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Diane, for doing the closed captioning for us. All right, you'll notice that this time we don't have pre-post questions or knowledge questions or thought questions because it's going to be pretty conversational. So we hope you'll just chime in as the boot strikes. How are we doing on people completing the short poll here?
We're at 79% now.
Perfect. Let's give it until we at 80%.
And we just hit 80.
All right, then we can close that and everybody should be able to just scroll through for yourselves about who we have in the room. Our goal is always to have different viewpoints represented and we are doing great on that. Perfect. Thank you all. Now, the next order of business, as you all know, if we go to the next slide, is the live feature to just really always ground us in what we're talking about with recovery community centers. And if you've seen all of the live features so far, you'll also notice that every single one is also different. Today, we have Angela Burton with us from the Detroit Recovery Project, and she's going to tell us about her RCC, where she's working at. So Angela, can you tell us what happens when you walk through the door of a Detroit Recovery Project?
It is my pleasure. Thank you first for having me. I'm a little nervous, so please
we all are.
Give me a little bit of grace. Bettina pushed me to do this, and so I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys. So I'll tell you first a little bit about myself, Angela Burton, Grants Manager, Evaluator for Detroit Recovery Project. And I just wanted to take a quick second and tell you about me and how I got to DRP, and then I'll talk about the rest. So I've been with DRP for about 20 years, since really its inception. First as a student, assisting with research, and to my current role. I think I've done everything from mopping the floors to payroll. So in the early 2000s, the health department in Detroit conducted a study to see why so many folks were returning for multiple treatment episodes. And what they found is that there was a lack of support, as we all know, upon leaving the safety net of a treatment center, which in a DRP. So we were funded by the city, and then as a RCSP, and we're peer run, peer led, peer driven, and we've remained one of, we're one of the first and one of the well-known RCCs in the state. So if you were to walk into DRP as a person seeking support, you will most likely be greeted by a kind, familiar face, because the majority of DRP staff are persons in recovery with lived experience, and they're working in every role possible as peer mentors, as therapists, you name it. So it's likely you've probably seen them at your local treatment center or during an outreach in the streets of Detroit, or even at a local NA meeting or an NA meeting at DRP. And you would have the opportunity to join one of those meetings, which often happens at many of our sites. or even just play pool with some recovery friends. You can sign up for peer mentorship or receive more clinical services like behavioral health therapy, MAT services, and primary care. DRP offers social support opportunities also. And that's like the weekly support groups that they have, bi-weekly events, such as our partnership with the Detroit Institute of Arts, which we're able to go to the DIA and do art projects, and then they'll display it. And it's really an opportunity to kind of get some unconventional art therapy. And it's been really wonderful. We've had a great turnout. And then we also have like an upcoming St. Patty's Day sober celebration. So events like that, we keep those going to maintain those positive connections. We've also expanded our services to address unmet needs of the community with our outreach and syringe service programming and primary care. But we remain grounded in our recovery support principles. And so that's what makes DRP still have the homey family feel that we've always had to welcome folks, whatever their stage of recovery is, whether they're coming in off the street or whether they are on their second round of treatment. One of my favorite parts of DRP is the daily miracle we get to see in watching one person come in one way and then leave out with a completely different outlook on life. And so I think that's what makes our RCC special. And I'm really thankful for the opportunity to share it with you.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Angela. That really does set the stage and grounds us of why we're all here and want to do this work. Wonderful. All right, let's go to the next slide so I can introduce our two speakers for today. And I will say that originally I just reached out to Danielle and said, look, Massachusetts has so many RCCs. How do you all do it? And can you provide insight? And then Jesse, I asked him to speak to what's it like in a different state, because I don't think Massachusetts is the way that everybody does it. Every state is very different. Every RCC is different, and every state is different for how they embrace the RCC idea and framework. So what we have today is we have Danielle O'Brien from who is the Recovery Support Center's administrator in Massachusetts, where she works in the Massachusetts Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. She's going to give us the lowdown of what's happening in Massachusetts. And then we will have Jesse Crum, who is a recovery services specialist from the Missouri Department of Mental Health, tell us his view of, contrasted versus what it looks like in Missouri. So we kind of get an idea for how common themes are versus how different things are. All right. So we're going to be jumping right in. So Danielle, my first question goes to you. Can you tell us more about what led to Massachusetts funding RCCs, investing in this idea?
Yeah, so hi everyone, Danielle O'Brien, Recovery Community Supports Coordinator with the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. And first I want to say, before I even start anything, that we are really pioneering in this work. The center's really being the lead in creating what a lot of this looks like. But where it came from really had a lot to do with advocacy and need. So in 2008, they funded 5 centers inspired by the Recover Project in Greenfield, Massachusetts. There was some out of the treatment box thinkers at the Bureau who wanted to take a shot on some different style of programming that was peer driven. And they funded those centers. And then over the years, brought on 5 more, created an RSS position, which Julio Ojeda is on the steering committee for the R24. That position was created. And that really embedded an advocate within the Bureau. So now you have an internal advocate. But simultaneously, due to the opioid epidemic in Massachusetts and the overdoses, there started to be some real advocacy and momentum coming from communities. People were really outraged and also were seeking for different types of supports to this problem. And right now we're losing about 6 people a day in Massachusetts. But when this first started, the outcry from peers, families, and communities across the state was really loud. And people began to mobilize and organize. And the centers ended up being at the heart of a lot of that as the advocates, as the peers, kind of driving that advocacy. And I remember we had opioid listening sessions at the State House with the governor, the secretary of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, the commissioner of Department of Public Health. And I was there speaking as a peer, as someone who worked at a recovery center, as someone grieving, but I was not alone. There were members and people from centers across the state who were coming. and we're gaining access to legislators and decision makers, and we're sharing how much the centers were helping them on their recovery journey. And over time, it wasn't so much the quantitative data, but this qualitative stories of people finding the support they needed to build and sustain recovery from opioid use disorder, but other addictions as well. And recovery coaching was growing also. And recovery coaches, often the first kind of pack of people that went out there into the workforce, were gaining access to different systems and settings like criminal justice system, like the hospitals, were kind of turning the hearts and minds of doctors, judges, probation officers, DCF, all of these other services, which then, which they cited the centers as being part of their own journey. So people started to take notice, and over time, simultaneously, the Department of Public Health was seeking solutions because they were seeing, and Dr. Kelly does this so well when he does the burning building, but Massachusetts has an excellent treatment system and is actually very progressive in their harm reduction and naloxone distribution. But there was really people wanting to see something to help end this revolving door of people seeking treatment and then coming out and going back, and then saw the excellent work the RCCs were doing. And 16 more centers were added in 2019. And then my position was created at the Bureau, and I came on at the end of 2019. And now we are in a new round of funding to add 10 more.
Very cool. And Kevin, can you advance a slide? I think there's a map here that just kind of shows, how many we currently have here.
Yes, so that's the 27 we have now in Massachusetts, and you can see it's dispersed throughout the state.
Perfect. And then, so let me see, can we advance the slide again, Kevin? And I think we already talked about this in the next one, because the next one I believe is Missouri. So Jesse, you kind of heard the story about how it happened in Massachusetts. Is that how things are looking in Missouri?
Yeah, Rosie Anderson Harper, who's the director of recovery in Missouri, and I have had several conversations, and we've looked, Danielle, at your state and hope to get there at some point. We haven't started quite as early as you have, but actually we watched the documentary The Anonymous People and saw the RCCs in there, and our director said, I love this. Let's try to see if we can do this. So when we had money available, she put it in the budget and it was accepted. And we started about 5 years ago with 4 recovery community centers. And they've been a really great success. And so with the SOAR money that we had, we tried to continue this, and we added 4 more, and in both situations we had invitation for bids, and our as you can see with the slides in front of you, we have served nearly 26,000 just in 2022, and our hope is, as I stated earlier, that we continue to increase because we have a low barrier. We want to make sure anybody that needs the assistance can walk through those doors. We've had a lot of Narcan distribution. We've had so many lives saved just from that aspect, but we focus on employment. We focus on groups, and we're pretty flexible. We have a wide array of services that our RCCs provide. Some are pro-social. They really focus on that. We actually have an RCC who's converted an old ambulance, and they have outreach, and they have a nurse practitioner on board, and there's just great things. We have Narcan distribution, vending machines, and there's just what we've seen from it has been great. And again, we hope that we can continue to add more. We do have other RCCs, but they're not state funded. So Danielle, we're hoping to catch up to you.
Well,
honestly, that's one of the many things I love about this community. It's inspiring each other, sharing resources, blazing the trail, being open to ideas. This is one of the many things I love. So awesome. But apart from that, though, there is a lot of not real work, but a lot of hard work that goes into it, organizational work. And Danielle, in Massachusetts, it's not like the state hands over money and says, good luck. Let's see how you do. What else do you guys do to support all these RCCs? And right now you have 27. Soon you will have 37, right?
Yes, we are slated to have that soon. And so we're trying to come up with different strategies because now it's growing. We're almost, developing a peer recovery support center system. And so we're trying different ways to figure out how to best support that. One of the first things that the Bureau did that I really want to raise up, because peer is the heart of all we do. Nothing about us without us. And I would say that Massachusetts has really held true to that from top to bottom, in the sense that from a new member walking in the door, all the way up to our roles on the RSS team at the Bureau is peer leadership development, all the way through. And I think that's something that's really unique. They just invested in, they had created my position in 2019. We just added 2 more positions, both also peers, and as with me, have lived experience in recovery, but also lived experience working in recovery support centers and with recovery coaching, which I think is really staying true to the model all the way through, which is exciting to me. But we currently are in the CAPRIS accreditation process. We have 17 centers that are in the process of applying. And we knew when they were charged with this in 2019 when funded, it was all systems go, and then COVID happened and really pushed back on that a little bit, because you need peers and community to really do this. But what has happened is, for centers that were established, the CAPRIS process kind of serves as a check and balance, where peers happening so organically in a lot of those spaces. It kind of brings you back to, okay, are we really staying true? And for the new centers, it provided them a lens to approach, how do we open a center? Where do we get started? It gave them some tools to really approach it with a CAPRIS lens, which is exciting. And we've provided some TA to support them with that. Jim Higgins is out there supporting folks. Really coaching and trying to be an ally in the process, but not so much helping them do it, because the learning is in the doing and experiencing. So, but really being there to break down concepts, because the elements and the standards within CAPRIS, can be explored in depth and really help people to ensure that peer is all the way through in the spaces. But we're doing a lot of other things as well. So I shared on the RSS team. We provide direct support to agency supervisors as well as the centers themselves, statewide directors meetings, a space for peer-to-peer learning from one another. A lot of the learning that takes place and a lot of the establishing of kind of the criteria moving forward is through the peers. It's the directors of these centers, it's the staff within these centers, learning communities, peer learning collaboratives for the staff themselves to gather together statewide. That was one of the silver linings of COVID, is that everyone is able to gather in this way. So we're able to pull the state together for learning often, which was something that we couldn't do in the past, and that's been really helpful. We have PRC direct TA from people who have had experience working in the centers as supervisors and directors to drive home the peer model and the peer participatory process model, as well as workshops and foundational training. All center staff are to attend the Recovery Coach Academy to get the core 5-day training of how to provide quality peer recovery support services. But we also provide more PRSC specific workshops, and they're in development now. But we've already started some, like ethics and boundaries in a center, exploring dimensions of wellness at a center. So we're excited about this new cohort of workshops that's forming. We have a multiple pathways conference coming that the centers will be in attendance at. We have regional PRSC meetings forming where all the centers, if you saw the map, there's clusters of centers. So we want to have those clusters of centers get close and be able to meet and learn from one another, particularly raise up the membership at those meetings and give them a chance to share and learn together, as well as some agency and supervisor trainings. I think this is one of the things we realize, that when you're funding this many centers, it's really important to ensure that the providers are educated on peer, that they know how to integrate peer services, that they can properly support and supervise the centers and the peer workers. So we want to really drive that home in the next round of funding. We're developing a landing page where all this can live, that the centers can access when they want to dive a little deeper into some of the concepts that we've laid out. And we are doing a PRSC statewide visioning and values project soon, which will kind of unite the centers all together and then be celebrated and culminate with a statewide event, our first big statewide event with all the centers. So we're excited about that.
Awesome, thank you. And for those of you who are not familiar with CAPRIS, Olivia and Deodora have been putting all kinds of useful links for you all in the chat. And if you can also put the link to one of our previous seminars on there, we had Patty McCarthy from Faces and Voices talk about that process and what RCCs do to go to pass that and to have it. Jesse, now you guys, you mentioned you've started more recently. What's this process looking like for you? Do you do this kind of training, capacity building, and support as well? How do you guys support your RCCs?
So we have statewide monthly meetings. We also require monthly reporting and data that comes in, so we can keep track of, you know, things like telephone support calls, the employment items, and drugs of choice and who's coming in, so we can keep that data. But as far as you said, with us being relatively new, we are looking at things like CAPRIS. We're looking to see if we need to bring in our certification team to look at certifying some of these programs, because as we add more, we'll probably need a little more oversight. You know, I know the mention with the peers that are involved, we do require the certified peer specialist trainings for the individuals that work at these RCCs. So we aren't at that level of CAPRIS. I know Danielle said that they're currently doing that. So we hope to move in the direction of some of those things, but right now we are not doing that. It is more monthly meetings, reporting and data that we require of them currently.
Right, just still lots of networking and collaborating between the centers and bring them together
Absolutely.
and to learn together. This is great. And Catherine, if you can stop screen sharing for a second. One of the things I was struck, and I didn't realize this was going to be the case, how much the state departments are embracing the peer model, and how that really filters through. That there isn't like this is one way, this is one rule book to follow. I mean, we talk about CAPRIS because there's some things you can learn and accreditation and so forth, but within their toolbox there is a lot of flexibility, and the peer model is front and center. And I was just wondering if Danielle, you can share how that feels like and why you think the state is successful in doing that.
Yes. So I would say that one thing that we've tried to do with the centers is really have that be at the heart of everything. So the peer participatory, we offer them to select whatever model they choose, but regardless of whatever model they choose, which right now is mostly peer participatory process model, we put into our request for response that all centers must have elements of this, that peer leadership development, peer voice, peer choice, regardless of what model or what your center looks like. That is one of the core components that must be implemented. So we've taken an approach of not being super prescriptive on how you do what you do. We'd rather them be unique and adapt to their own community's choice. But there are a few things that we do require, and that is one. So the peer is center to everything that is done in the space. And to drive home the importance of the model not being lost, no matter what is happening. But how they can do it, we've created a lot of space for creativity around that, which is exciting to really, and you will see if you ever traveled around or even looked at the Facebook of our centers, there's a very different flavor, very different culture, and we want that. We want to empower them to be true to their community, but always keeping peer center.
Very cool. And in fact, you mentioned earlier also that peers are promoted within the state in terms of like the structure. So that voice is really heard at every level. That really helps to stay true to that mission too. And I love that it's uniquely tailored to the communities. Is that also the feeling that you get and working in Missouri, Jesse?
Yes, we like to keep it unique because just as Danielle said, you know, the different cities, environments, so on, we like them to tailor it to what they feel their consumers need. Some of our RCCs, they're very focused on pro-social activities. some are focused, on wound care, and all of them have, a lot of groups and employment focus. And we even have Healing House in Kansas City who actually is connected with an HVAC program, and so they allow their participants to go there and get trained to learn how to do that for work. So there is different focuses on each of the RCCs, but we do have that peer focus. We do make sure that we have the Narcan available, and we're trying to connect them to whatever resources that they can use, whether it's housing or even treatment. So we really work with them to make sure they're all collaborating with the providers in their region. But we do try to keep it unique for each of the RCCs.
Awesome. Now, Danielle, you have had the chance to actually visit a whole number of RCCs because you have so many in Massachusetts, and you also do evaluation work. Can you tell us more about how you're checking in, the kind of evaluation work you've done, and the strengths you've noted in doing that, and the challenges that have arisen in overseeing this? And Kevin, if we can go back to our slideshow so Danielle can walk us through that kind of work.
Sure. So we've been approaching it in multiple ways. And like I said, all of this is evolving. We don't know what is going to be the best overall, but I can share with you what we've done the last few years and what things have been standard overall. So from the beginning, quarterly reporting has always been part of this, where centers directors do submit. They are recovery-oriented tools. They are PRSC specific. We are revamping them now, which is exciting. They do member enrollment and disenrollment, but our ESM system is really a treatment data collection system. So we are excited to be working with Dr. Kelly and the RRI team on revamping some of the ways that we do what we do, including the surveys that we do with our members to really create. We've really been working with them and have created a recovery-oriented system tool that they have created for us with input from the peers throughout. So we actually ran this by the directors. We included folks in the process. We shared it out to make sure as we were creating it that it is vetted by peers, and also ensuring that it is in English and Spanish so that we are inclusive of our Spanish speaking members, which in the past we weren't able to capture. So very exciting. We do formal site visits with regional managers, which are more contractual. And then we do informal site visits, which is more about relationship building, learning the space, provided targeted support. It could be supporting an event or activity. Myself or members from the team, who I believe they're on here today. I want to give a shout out to my teammates. I gave Julia a shout out earlier. I want to give a shout out to Debbie Flynn Gonzalez and Michael Bryant, who I believe are on here, who are in this work as well. And, we want to go out there and support the centers and share strategy in a way that's a little bit more informal as well. But one of the most exciting things, which isn't on the slide, is we did a PRSC 2022 site visit and assessment project with Dr. Jomer Achara, and Achara Consulting began working with us at BSAS to provide ROSC education, really, both internally, but then to the PRSC providers and to us, which was helpful. Debbie and Mike are located at polar sides of the state, and part of that is really part of a ROSC effort to take the approach regionally to build out these person-centered network of services and supports, with the centers being at the helm of that, right? But we also began having some work with her directly to the PRSC, which was exciting and included this assessment. We visited as a team, myself and the team, 24 centers. It was virtual, but it included receiving feedback in 72 separate interviews and focus groups, discussions. And then we were able to take that back, and they presented us with an executive summary. Now, some of this I'd already seen in the work from being out there and learning from the directors, but to have this concrete tool, this executive summary that really highlighted some of the strengths and challenges was really helpful. And I think—
Shall we advance the slides?
Yeah, we should advance the slide. But one thing that was really cool that was in that executive summary, and I'll quote, is members repeatedly credited the peer recovery support centers with saving their lives. The investment in developing these centers has resulted in the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services developing a strong statewide network of community-based peer supports that is not only improving health outcomes and quality of life for people impacted by substance use conditions, it is also poised to serve as a national model for others seeking to nurture the development and expansion of community recovery capital. So that was, when I read that, I'm like, whoa, because sometimes I forget how big and unique this is, what we're doing here, but also knowing in my heart from having been in this work, the impact that the centers have, that sometimes it takes having it on paper and done in this more formalized way, right, to get others to really to see it. So what was revealed from that was our strengths was peer participation, which I touched on earlier. So it went into really finding that the Mass PRCs have a true peer culture, that peer leadership development is critical, that it is part of the day-to-day. Community inclusion was really raised up by a lot of the members, feeling like coming to the Center for Support or Recovery, and then really finding that they receive support in how to navigate life overall, and then feeling like the center actually helped them build this new identity as a recovering person in that larger community. So that's really powerful. So the space is being a place for affinity as a person in recovery, where you see it's a healing environment, next is safety, but then also being plugged in to a new life in recovery in a wider way, in a broader way. So that was exciting findings across the board. And a lot of that comes from the community partnerships and advocacy. So a lot of our centers dedicate a great deal of time in relationship building and partnership development, which helps with outreach and which helps with creating opportunities for the membership that they might not have access to through treatment or through other means. And this becomes kind of a hub of connection to employment services. They have credit unions coming in, presenting on financial literacy, and other supports for members, parenting, and also directors and staff of the centers participating on a lot of local committees, mayors boards, coalitions, task forces, really being out there in community, interacting with clergy, interacting with police departments, first responders, and educating on recovery and making the centers known where they are and really being out there. And that has been a huge benefit to the membership, as well as advocacy and their connection to organizations like the Massachusetts Organization of Addiction Recovery, which often pulls together our centers statewide as part of the advocacy movement, which is very powerful as well. And support of multiple pathways was raised up as something that was across the board, really a strength of our centers. Diverse calendars from all the centers, that is a mix of traditional recovery supports and programs that people know about, like 12-Step and SMART and Wellbriety, as well as unique peer groups often created by the members, and then other activities that promote wellness that have nothing to do with any of the traditional stuff like music, art, physical fitness, yoga, these type of things can be found at the centers. Resilience and innovation through COVID and beyond. Some of them creating apps that they still use, some of them creating huge outdoor spaces and erecting tents to get through COVID, many taking boots to the ground and figuring out another way to reach their folks when their centers were shut down, and just really being innovative in general in how they approach supports. And then the last thing, which we'll go into more later, was the assertive community outreach, which we'll touch on a little bit later. And then the common issues across the board were mental health supports. In Massachusetts, we are, unlike some states, we're siloed, so we're separate. So Department of Public Health is Substance Use Disorder Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. And Department of Mental Health is a whole different department. So we don't have the interconnectedness to services. And a lot of the centers raised up feeling, especially in the aftermath of COVID, an influx of folks in more acute mental health situations and crisis, and they didn't really feel equipped, especially with a lot of the staff being maybe entry level or new, haven't really received any training yet, or it's a lot of volunteers running the show and they haven't received any solid training yet. So that was one of the things that was kind of a challenge. Wages, lack of trajectory, feeling that they wanted more staff at the centers. There was turnover. wanting recovery coaching in the space, or staff that's a little bit more trained to deal with some of the situations I just mentioned, but also to offer support to the folks coming in with a little bit more higher need or who prefer one-on-one connection, center-specific training, and funding for services and tangible supports. People raised up really wanting to be able to sometimes just help someone with some basic need that's presenting right in front of them, or celebrating a member or volunteer that's making strides in their recovery, but is hitting a little barrier, like needing one little thing for their new job and they can't do it because they haven't gotten paid yet, or transportation to something. So these are things we really considered in the next round of funding.
Great. That's a lot of food for thought right there. While we digest that, Jesse, is this the similar, or very different kinds of issues that you have seen in Missouri?
Yeah, a lot of what Danielle said is what we're seeing too. And again, with us being somewhat new to it, we're trying to tackle some of those things. And so I'm sure Danielle will be touching base at some point, because we definitely would like to see what some of the barriers you're seeing over the years. I think you said 2008 was when you guys had started. But a lot of our RCCs, when we had the invitation for bid, a lot of the programs that ended up being selected have really strong leadership. So they've been in this environment for a really long time and have an understanding. And so it's made it really easy on us, because they have all these connections in the region, in St. Louis, in Kansas City. And they have each other to lean on too. So when we get together and we have our meetings, I always tell them, you all are the experts. You understand the problems. And so some of these barriers, they've dealt with in the past and in other areas. So we feel really strongly about who we have in leadership of these RCCs. So that helps us, because on our side of the administrative side, we're always advocating for the RCCs, and we're hoping to obtain more funding and so on. And we have that trust that they're going to continue to do the really good work that they're doing.
Great. And I see Deodora has raised her hand, probably to remind me to look at the chat and answer all those questions. Is that right, Deodora?
Yes, we have 2 questions so far that I can see in the chat. The first one that I see is from Laura Kelly. Do the SAMHSA-funded addiction technology transfer centers also support RCCs with training or other technical assistance?
I don't know, Danielle, Jesse?
That I am not familiar with that part of SAMHSA being part of any funding that we have currently.
I know that the Peer Center of Excellence has been a good place for folks to find training that can be center specific or peer specific, and that has been leveraged. We have the New England training ATTCs, and that has been leveraged as well. And we have great trainings that are BSAS AdCare that are for peers that are leveraged by our staff as well. But we do not have our own. We hope to. BSAS has funded a recovery education collaborative, which has the potential to really grow to do all these things. But for now, we don't have in our state our own offered kind of foundational peer recovery support center training. So we get it from a variety of avenues, including some of the local ATCNE. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but you know what I mean. Sort of what you just referenced. We do leverage that.
Perfect.
And we do have a lot of resources in the chat that people are putting in as well.
Yeah, and I think I saw Amy Brinkley raise her hand, and then you also put something into the chat. Did you want to say what you just said here? Or would you ask your question?
I'm happy to. It wasn't a question. I was just sharing that the TTCs all have an equal partnership within the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence to provide that level of TA, and that's SAMHSA funded. The mental health equivalent is Doris Wellbeing through Copeland Center.
Awesome, thank you. And then I also saw, I'm sorry, where's the comment? If it was Sarah Barja, who was talking about Portland and saying that you've actually really doubled staffs. And I was just curious if you wanted to share more about how you were able to do that or how that's working out, if you're comfortable sharing. We can also move on.
I was just eating apples and peanut butter. I'm like, hold on.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, exactly what Danielle was saying. That like especially after COVID, we just see a lot of high acute mental health coming into the centers and staff not being equipped to always deal with that. So a lot of escalation happening. And then I don't know, in Portland, Oregon, we actually just passed the Measure 110. So we do have extra funding, but we also, it's kind of a complicated thing because we've decriminalized personal uses of drugs. And so the police, it's just a complex thing. And so we are right now, we have the money to put in more staff. So we're doing that. And we are doing aggressive outreach too, so that we can engage people, because they're not going to jail or anything like that until they steal a car multiple times, then they go to jail, but so we have to go out there and grab people when they're willing to, when in that window they might be willing to come and get a peer mentor or come hang out at the centers. And in the meantime, give them harm reduction supplies, weather related supplies, wound care and whatnot. Did I answer the question?
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing all this. This is perfect. Thank you.
I was trying to jot down what Danielle was saying. I'm like, oh, good. I was like, it was so perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. And Theodora, you said that was the second question?
Yes. I apologize if I pronounced the name wrong. Kirscher Highsmith asked, do any of the RCCs offer peer recovery doula support? If so, can you share any data on recovery support for postpartum women?
Either of you, Danielle, Jesse, what's your take on this?
Go ahead, Jesse.
We do not have that, so I don't have much to say on that topic, so sorry about that.
I will say, Jesse, that didn't you mention that you guys do have actually not parenting help in terms of people taking on your kids and helping with that babysitting, that sort of thing, which is pretty novel.
Yes, Healing House in Kansas City they set the bar for our RCCs, and they understand that some of these individuals they need assistance. So when they're at the RCC going to classes and groups and so on, there is some childcare availability there. So that's as you said, Bettina, it's very novel. We love it, and that's one of those things where each RCC is pretty unique. So that was one thing they really felt like they needed to do, and that particular RCC has transformed that entire community. They took that area that was crime ridden and essentially have bought up multiple blocks of houses and so on, and have just they've done great work.
In Massachusetts, a lot of the centers have done a lot of work around this, and some are really family oriented, family friendly centers. They've really made an effort to even go so far as to build relationships with DCF, which in Massachusetts is the Department of Children and Families, and have created space within their center to have visits, who are women who are unifying with their children. And it's in a slide a couple down in the pictures, but we do have a center that was recently recognized for creating space for pregnant parenting or parenting women, really having safe space within the center for a certain time of the day. And within that window, having a Miracle Mamas specific group that is a support group for folks that are pregnant or parenting. But a lot of the centers, and my colleague in this work, Debbie Flynn Gonzalez, has done a lot of work around women's and created centers out in Western Mass that really do a lot of work around this and creating spaces within the center for pregnant and postpartum and parenting.
Awesome. And I will say, I mean, that takes so much trust, right? When it comes to when it comes to children, you always are so super protective. So being able to open up and ask the community for support for dealing with agencies and so forth, it shows the kind of safe haven that RCCs create to be able to help in that capacity, because it takes a lot of trust to do that. So awesome. All right, I'm going to move us on just a little bit, because Danielle did also have take-home messages that they had after they saw these strengths and issues, and I wanted her to get a chance to walk us through that as well.
All right, so I'll try to be quick. I know we don't have a lot of time, but from those findings, from those site visits, as well as the work that we've done within the Bureau to connect with the centers and learn from them, surveying directors, through all of that, we've tried to take some action. So there's been some great results of that, and really ensuring, because the site visit project we did ensured member voice, staff voice, and director voice, really ensuring that those peer voices shape some of the decision-making around this round of funding. So really wanting to equip the centers to address the mental health challenges they're facing. So we have our first supporting mental health at a PRC workshop at the end of this month. We're actually having a community hearing with the center staff around it within the next week to hear, for them to raise up really what is going on to help shape that workshop. And we are going to be offering statewide de-escalation, mental health, first aid, trauma-informed peer support to the centers to ensure that they all are receiving it. And it's not just as piecemeal as it's been, with kind of getting it where they can, but really help facilitate that. And we have in Massachusetts just launched crisis behavioral health centers, and almost all of them are right near a center. And in the proposal for those, they said they were going to partner with us. So I have been working hard to ensure that that partnership happens, because these will be one-stop shops for really anybody experiencing SUD or mental health needs, whether from crisis or just looking for something to support them, can go get a warm handoff and referral to the appropriate level of care that they need. And I think this will be a real asset to the PRC to have this tool. We really wanted to provide clear guidance and also kind of unite folks under the shared recovery values. So the RFR itself that just went out kind of forms as a template of what are like the core things we expect of a center, and also where is there lots of room for you to be creative and adapt to your community needs. So that is helpful in really helping across the board, everyone having a clear picture. But we did variations around what model they can use, what kind of programming is offered in the space. And we offered tiers. So they are actually all received more money in their budget, which was something that people really fought for wanting, but also then that they can grow. So they can stay the size they are now, or they can go up to 5.5 staff or 7 staff. So that's really to address the staffing needs that they raised up, and allowing those positions to be tailored to what the community need is. And of course, the Values Project and event that we're having, really bringing everybody together. And then the next slide's the end of it with kind of what we've done in response to.
Catherine, can you advance the slide?
Thank you, Catherine. Increased trained staff was something that was really raised up, and I had showed in the needs. So by incorporating recovery coaching into the centers, recovery coaches not only attend that 30-hour, 5-day Recovery Coach Academy training, they go on to attend another 30 hours of training, really diving into ethics and boundaries, diversity, equity, inclusion, mental wellness, like these type of topics. So this will allow the centers to create that trajectory within that they kind of wanted, where it's not just you're either entry level, going from a peer leadership to an entry level position, or you're the director, but really having different levels of trained, experienced staff within the space with roles and responsibilities tailored to that individual. So instead of us saying you need to have all your staff look exactly like this, we said these are the responsibilities we want fulfilled. You tailor that to what your center looks like, to the staff you currently have or who you seek to have. So that's been really exciting. And we've switched our contracting style. So under the new contracts, they are allowed to have ancillary supports and complementary non-clinical complementary RSS services kind of connected to the space in a way that they were limited in doing before. So that's very exciting. So when somebody comes in, they could have a direct connection to some of the support that they are expressing they need in a way that they did not before. And then one of the recommendations was to ensure equitable allotment, but it was difficult to do this with the accommodation rate that the way that we're doing things. But because there's been a general increase and the option to choose how big you want to be and so on, the rest of your budget goes up with that, and then they are able to tailor that. So I'll just give an example. Like if you were in a rural part of Massachusetts, transportation might be your primary, because that's how you can help get people to the space and so on. So you might say, we want to finance a van, like that's what we need. And we would be fine with them doing that. Whereas maybe in the city, the rent's higher for their center, but that's not, they might want to spend money less in another area that's not as pressing. So we want to really give them the opportunity to tell us how they want to do it. And by fostering equity through non-prescriptive accountability, I made that up. But basically what I mean to say is not being prescriptive with how you do it, but we do intend to monitor. So we want you to tell us what you're going to do, and we'll monitor to ensure you're doing that and that the community needs are being met without us being prescriptive on how you do it. And then, of course, lastly, very excited about the project with RRI, in that the reporting from that can really help us. Although it's not a huge impact evaluation, these studies and this data is going to really help shape how we make decisions in the future, and also give centers a tool to receive reporting back that can help them use peer process to make decisions in their space that's informed by data. So that's very exciting.
That's great. And there was a question here from Donald McDonald. Are your RCCs still free to engage in advocacy? Sometimes state and federal funding dampens that core responsibility.
No, they are still empowered to engage in advocacy. We actually have a very loud and proud, I would say, recovery community throughout the state that is very vocal and are able to participate.
Awesome. Very, very cool. These are amazing take-home messages and actions, and really show responsiveness to so many different things. That's inspiring. I love it. Jesse, you obviously also are developing with your center, so you probably do this too, the listening and then thinking through how you can adapt to make the system work better for the RCCs.
Yeah, the advocacy piece, that question is definitely something that that we definitely want. And with Missouri and our RCCs, we try to be as flexible as we can, because there are needs that they have, and so when we have some extra funding or available funding, we will sometimes just reach out to the RCCs and see what they need, and verify that it can be covered with our fiscal department, and we try to make sure we're assisting them as best as possible. So we definitely are always trying to, we actually try to advocate for the RCCs a lot. So we know what great work they're doing, so we try to not be the barrier for them to reach the consumers that need help.
Awesome. Now we're almost out of time, but I wanted to make sure that we leave on this note. Exactly. Thank you, Catherine, for advancing this slide. We've talked a lot about outreach, and I wanted Danielle to just kind of share how unique communities exist, and how each RCC is different and reaches out to their community.
So I know these pitches are a little wonky, but stay with me. So it was hard to decide, because honestly, so many of them just have a unique ability to reach certain groups. And I think that the previous research on the RCCs put out by RRI really showed that. Like, we just have, and other research as well, that we just have, the RCCs have this unique ability to reach marginalized groups, and we're pulling people in unique ways. And so it's not even about, it's like the charge on the centers, and we're very specific with this in our request for response too, that you are committed to taking the extra steps to not only create spaces that are equitable, welcoming, that there's a sense of belonging and inclusiveness, but that you are willing to go the extra step to perform assertive outreach to ensure. So that's kind of, two parts to that. And they have some success with that. The center that I actually came from, Divine Recovery Center, the agency and the center itself spent a great deal of time building relationships with the criminal justice system. And what that did was allowed us to reach both the BIPOC and folks from low-income communities who, in many cases, had never accessed our treatment system. They were, war on drugs, the whole thing, racist policies, but The idea being that they had substance use disorder and were finding themselves incarcerated, and this became a cycle for them. So while some folks were going through the revolving door of treatment, some folks were going through the revolving door of incarceration. And we were able to gain access to the prisons, the peer program in the prisons. I was able to go into the women's prison. I was able to go into the House of Corrections, participate on panels with local drug courts where I attended the sessions, and really reach people who found themselves in that system and pull them into the center. And that proved really beneficial. And that's why you see in the top picture, that's a basketball game from that center over the summer, a really diverse mix. And it should be noted, that's a predominantly white community, but the center does not reflect that. The center reflects diversity. And then I touched earlier on the Miracle Mamas program, that's right below. Everyday Miracles in Worcester creates a safe space for women for a few hours a day to really ensure that population feels welcome to the space. And then within that has this group for pregnant or parenting mothers to support one another. And LGBTQIA plus is another group that the centers reach at a much higher rate than the treatment system reaches. And I love this post. Shout out to Northampton. If you're on here, I have saved this in my phone and I've used it multiple times since Pride Month because I just loved it. This really welcoming message. It's out there on social media. They have the flag hanging outside of the space, and they are going out of their way to ensure that that community feels welcome and knows that they have a place there and that they are welcome there. And a lot of the centers do this. They participated in Pride Month. They have LGBTQIA specific peer groups, which is exciting. We have Hope for Holyoke down the bottom. Really a fully bilingual center. And one of the strongest advocates to ensure that the survey coming out next is also in Spanish. So we're able to take that information. Peer-to-peer is not on here, but I wanted to raise that up as a center who really approached pulling in marginalized groups via assertive outreach. So they actually strategized on everything from hiring bilingual staff to empowering staff and members to go out, boots on the ground, out in community, not waiting for folks to trickle into the space, but going out to the community and even creating surveys to go out to the larger community for them to share what they want to see in the space. What would it take to bring you into our space? So already making folks feel welcomed who don't even know about the space. And then lastly, I would just raise up my young people in Massachusetts Young People in Recovery, which started out of a new way. Which was actually kind of an older mixed center. And they hired a youth coordinator to come in, and she started pulling in young adults to participate in the space. And I wish I had the picture. There's an amazing picture of a bunch of people with their arms around each other. And it's literally like a 24-year-old and a 60-year-old, a 24-year-old and a 50-year-old, a 22-year-old. And, and that is just one of the things about the space. There's a pocket of youth, there's a pocket of older folks, and everyone kind of comes together from all these different backgrounds. But a lot of it does require this more assertive and thoughtful strategic outreach to ensure that everyone's welcomed into the space.
Awesome. We are unfortunately at the hour. We're 2 minutes past. A couple of us can stay around. No, don't apologize. Jesse will have to go, but a couple of us will stay. Before we stop recording, I wanted to make sure I thank you, Danielle, Jesse, Angela. You've been wonderful, providing us so much food for thought and insight, and everybody else for raising the questions and sharing as well. So thank you, everybody, for being here and keeping this discussion going. Greatly appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Catherine, if you can end the recording.